Good morning and welcome to this video where we're going to discuss the dynamics of cishet dating as I understand it. Now obviously there are other kinds of dating, but I am in no way qualified to talk about those. I'm not particularly qualified to talk about cishet dating either, but that's the one that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, so that's what we're doing. The nature of this topic means it's going to be a little bit more scattershot than my other videos have been, hopefully, just because it is far less cut and dry. So let's just get stuck in and find out why I have a problem with the power dynamics in traditional relationships. Now, this channel is mostly a place where I can lay out the thought processes that I've acquired after many arguments and debates with people about all sorts of different topics. This is a topic which I end up arguing with people about quite a bit, because I have only spent 2 of my 33 years on this planet with a girlfriend. And that was over 5 years ago, so now people are starting to get anxious on my behalf, which is nice of them. Now, before we start, we're going to preface this with something of a ground rule, as well as an attempt to make sure there's no incels out there thinking that I'm dog whistling for them. And what I want to say is that any time I have liked a woman and she has had a partner, that partner has been a fantastic person who I get along with like a house on fire. And there's a good reason for this. Because if I like that person, then that person is somebody I think that I have a compatible personality with. And if I think we have compatible personalities, then that means that if they like a person, then by all rights, I'm going to like a person. And if I keep looking at the partners that she's choosing and seeing that they're all terrible people, then perhaps she is the problem. For my purposes. Obviously, for her purposes, she's probably doing fine. Obviously, I have no data to back this up whatsoever, but let me put it to you that if you are into somebody and they are going out with somebody terrible, then that person that you are into, barring some act of deception on the other person's part, is probably also somebody that you are going to think is terrible. So with that out of the way, let's get started with something simple. Women like tall men. Obviously not all women like tall men, but a vast majority of them seem to, according to the statistics. Men do not reciprocate this nearly as vociferously. Obviously there will be some men that are into shorter women, but actually the majority of men have no problem going out with a woman that is their height or taller. Now, if you ever get yourself onto the dating app scene, get yourself onto Tinder or onto Bumble or something like that, you will see, if you are a male looking for a female, that there is a preponderance of women that are demanding taller men, and in ridiculous ways. Like, you'll find tiny women demanding at least like 2 or 3 extra heads of height on their potential partner. And I'd say that's too many heads. Obviously, you can find love anywhere, but to demand love in that place, let's look at some reasons why that might not be the best idea. 1. If you're sharing an umbrella, you are going to get rained on if you are that much shorter than the other person. Which brings me to 2. A wise woman once said, "You know what size spoons fit together best? Same size spoons." 3. Consider evolution. If women all demand to go out with tall men, you will end up with a species where all of the females are small and all of the males are big. And this isn't necessarily a problem. Humanity will be able to survive this. However, if you want people to stop claiming that men are naturally bigger and stronger than women, then perhaps don't force nature's hand. Which leads us to the final part of this, which is 4. Do you want someone that you feel can protect you? There's an obvious appeal to that, certainly. But it seems to me that there's also an obvious danger of getting yourself into dependent relationships. The kind of relationship that could easily turn into toxic or abusive relationships. Because if your relationship is fundamentally based on the fact that he is bigger and stronger than you, then what is your recourse if he becomes violent? And from the other angle, what are we to think of a big man who prefers to go out with the kind of smaller woman that he has power over and can control. And this is where we slam face first into my fundamental problem with dating. Men are expected to initiate the relationship. Now, yes, of course, there are women that are willing to initiate a relationship, but that doesn't mean that they're in the majority, and certainly not in such numbers that we can look at cis-het relationships as a whole and say that they evenly represent couples where the man initiated the relationship, where the woman initiated the relationship, and where they kind of just sort of fell into a relationship somewhere. I see this very much as a pillar of the patriarchy, and that's why, maybe about a year ago, I made a conscious decision to not ask women out, and to not intend to ask women out. To stop doing the whole, oh, why am I not asking her out? No. I would assume the traditionally female role and expect women to take the initiative. People were not and people are not happy with this decision. Mostly people are telling me that I'm lazy, that I'm a coward, or they'll say, well, but nobody's ever going to change, so I'm going to end up forever alone. There's actually one friend of mine who said that this entire patriarchy lark is bollocks, because she definitely has the power in the relationships, even if somebody asks her out, because she gets to say no, and therefore she gets to decide who she goes out with. Let me tell you about Boss Tweed. Boss Tweed was a USAian politician, and he was hilariously corrupt. And one of the ways that his corruption manifested itself was in derailing democracy. How did he derail democracy? Well, in his own words, I don't care who does the electing, so long as I get to do the nominating. The point is that whoever gets to go first at nominating political candidates is the person that actually has the power. And this works with all sorts of decisions. For instance, who runs the UK? Does the Queen run the UK, or does the Prime Minister run the UK? Sure, the Queen has a veto. Any law that comes to her, she can say, no, I don't want this law. But she can't say which laws she does want. She can't suggest laws that she wants to see. And more importantly, should she ever actually veto a law, she will soon find that the United Kingdom becomes the United Republic of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And that's where your power of veto just breaks down. If you like a guy and you want to go out with him, you have no power to make that happen. The only power you have is to prevent a guy going out with you. But if you go long enough without anybody suitable asking you out, assuming that you care about having a relationship, then you will eventually find that your standards start slipping. And it becomes much easier for men to become somebody suitable. Assuming, of course, that you stick to the standard formula. But wait! I hear you cry. Just putting yourself in the traditionally female position is just causing the same problem in reverse, and you'd make a lot of sense. But here's how I see it. If the cis-het dating pool is made up on the one hand of people who demand that the men be in control, and on the other hand of people who are cool with a bit of equality, then your average in the pool is somewhere in the middle of that. But it gets better, because actually, if those are your only two dynamics, then it becomes beneficial for women to work within the traditional dynamic. Allow me to draw a 2x2 matrix. Along the top we have women, and those women are either going to demand that men take the initiative, or they are going to be happy to take the initiative themselves. And then, down the side, we have men, and those men are either going to demand that men take the initiative, or be cool being asked out. Now, in this situation, if a woman expects to be asked out, then she has here an equal chance of being asked out by somebody who goes by the traditional dynamic, or by somebody that's willing to do either way. But if a woman is willing to ask, then she still has an equal chance of succeeding with the one guy, but with the other, she's guaranteed rejection, which means that actually the traditional dynamic is the more beneficial situation to be in. At least it will feel like it from a risk assessment point of view. And that risk is further compounded by the fact that if you were to ask a man out in such a patriarchal society, then that woman will be tarred among the man's social circle as being the kind of willful woman brazen enough to ask out a man, and we can't be having that. However, if we add a third row of men who demand that women ask them out and who are unwilling to do the asking out, then we have now added a section to our matrix which only the women who are willing to ask men out can possibly get to. And that means that the woman that is expecting men to ask her out is now worse off, and the woman that is happy to ask men out now has an incentive to be assertive. It is not enough for some men to be equal. As long as there are men who demand a patriarchal relationship, then there have to be men that flat out refuse that relationship. Otherwise, your middle ground is not equality, but less patriarchy. And that's not good enough. So why does this responsibility fall on me? It doesn't. It falls on anybody and everybody who is willing and able to take on the burden, and that burden is surprisingly heavy. The social circles that I run in mean that the majority of my friends are women, that a significant amount of those women are of a suitable age and disposition, and are women that I consider attractive. Some of them I am actively attracted to and would very much like to attempt a relationship with. People will tell you that all you have to do is flirt, the other person will notice that you are flirting and you can start a relationship, but the fact is that casual flirting is indistinguishable from just being a nice person, and active flirting is too similar for my liking to a power play. I will not succumb to the patriarchy. I will sit here and I will put on a happy face and I will allow my soul to be rent asunder because women that I've thought far too much about show no indication of wanting a relationship with me. But I'm used to it. I have the sort of personality that is able to shrug these things off and get on with it. And in a useful way, not in the repressing it and then ending up institutionalized down the line kind of way. More importantly, I understand and I believe that I am not entitled to anything from anybody. And anything I do get is a happy bonus. And there's another side to this too. So my ex-girlfriend used to say words to the effect of having children being cruelty to those children. That the world that we would be bringing them into is not one in which you would want to raise a human. And that might seem extreme, but if you think about it, we've had over a century of suffrage, of women's rights activism, and yet somehow it's still a problem if women ask men out. How are we supposed to advance if we've got to this point and we've still not managed to even shift that incredibly trivial mindset? I have friends. I have good friends. I can live with that. I would like more, but there is a price that I'm unwilling to pay for it. I should also mention 2 women in recent memory who have asked me out, albeit both obliquely, and though I didn't feel a spark with either of them, they are very much 2 of my favourite women, not just because they are wonderful people, but because they have proven to me that there is hope, and thus given me hope in humanity. So hopefully, what I've been able to convince you of is that traditional dating dynamics are dangerously skewed towards propping up the patriarchy. And if we do want to get away from propping up that patriarchy, there have to be those among us on the male side that are willing to suffer the other side of the dating dynamic that women have been suffering through for centuries. That if we want equality, it is not enough to just preach equality, but we have to be also willing to tip the scales the other way so that society ends up in the middle as a whole. As ever, I am entirely likely to be wrong about this, and I need you to tell me all about it in the comments. Or maybe you actually agree with me and want to back me up with well-considered points and arguments. And you know what? Feel free. And in the meantime, I'll go come up with some more videos, shall I? Yes.